What if the life you're working towards is quietly draining the part of you that would actually enjoy it? If that question hits, it's usually because things are actually going well. You're not lost, falling apart, or confused about how life works. You did what you were supposed to do. You built something, became competent, reliable, and you made yourself valuable. Yet somewhere along the way, life started to feel heavier instead of richer. Over thousands of clinical hours sitting with people who, on paper at least, have achieved immense success, I keep hearing the same thing, and I'm going to share that with you in this video, because we're taught to admire people who build impressive lives, but nobody tells us what it costs them internally. Founders, professionals, creators, leaders, people who did the work. A surprising number of them say some version of the same sentence. I've achieved everything I set out to achieve, and I feel emptier than ever. So is it a question of needing a new goal, or is that just an insatiable quest for an ever-elusive future where happiness exists? What I hear is, I thought I'd feel different by now. But what if there was something I found out about how to live a happy and fulfilling life right now? This video is about why this happens and how to fix it. By the end of this, you'll understand why burnout often shows up as success, why purpose disappears when life looks great, and why direction only returns when something very specific changes. And none of this has to do with motivation, discipline, or mindset. It has to do with how our identity forms. Most people assume purpose is something we find, a direction, a calling, or a passion. That assumption sends people searching outward. And the internet is full of productivity coaches, accountability overlords, self-optimization specialists, but all of them focus on achieving more goals, more optimization, and more self-analysis. The search for more is part of the problem. Whenever we need more, it reveals a belief that we're not enough. But what if the need for these coaches is there because we're trying to coach ourselves into a life that doesn't align with our core values? Purpose doesn't vanish because we failed to discover it. It disappears when the version of success we're chasing is based on someone else's idea of achievement. Our success becomes enmeshed with societal acceptance, and purpose doesn't play well with approval. So how does this actually start? As a child, connection is survival. So our nervous system learns quickly what keeps our caregivers calm, what earns praise, what avoids conflict, what makes me easier to love, who must I be to be acceptable and valued. We learn to be helpful, impressive, quiet, strong, achievement-based, not to need much, to do whatever we need to ensure we don't make things harder for anyone else. To a reliant child, these are intelligent adaptations, meaning they work. They keep us connected and they keep connection intact. They reduce risk, they make life predictable. But over time, those adaptations harden into a false identity. We stop noticing them as strategies and start using them as personality. All of a sudden, they feel like who we are. And maintaining identity becomes the organizing principle of our life. So why does this lead to burnout and a longing for depth? Identity maintenance costs us energy. At first, that energy can feel meaningful and directive, but later it feels obligatory, and eventually it feels draining. Suppressed identity is a direct correlative of depression. And this is where people get confused, because nothing is wrong. The job is okay, the relationship is acceptable, and the day-to-day structure works. But the self is no longer present. So burnout shows up quietly, and our motivation drops, our curiosity narrows, and nothing feels compelling enough to choose, because the system is tired of performing. So why do we get stuck here? When we invest a lifetime into our identity, exploring a new, more authentic version feels extremely risky. There's no known outcome, no certainty that will be accepted or valued. It risks the stability of all we've created around us. And when this happens, people usually try to think their way out. They may journal, analyze, or look for clarity. But thinking doesn't resolve identity exhaustion, because the problem isn't insight, it's safety. There's a moment that shows up again and again in therapy. Someone starts talking about what they might want. Then they pause and think, will this disappoint someone? Will this change how I'm seen? Will this destabilize what I've built? Conditioning shows up and the default version of ourselves takes over. Purpose stays hidden when being ourselves once carried consequences. There's a trade most people make without realizing it, because we learned how to be valued and acceptable, not how to be expressed as ourselves. And in earning acceptance through attachment, we trade away our authenticity. That trade makes life functional, but it doesn't make it meaningful. Over time, people become very good at managing themselves. They stay flexible, keep options open, and avoid full commitment. And flexibility looks like freedom until it doesn't. Because when everything stays possible, nothing becomes worth choosing. That's when people say they feel stuck. They're not stuck in life, they're stuck in an identity that no longer fits, and the fear of taking a step outside the realm is never rewarded by society. Because purpose is personal. Purpose isn't something we invent, it's something that grows out of a lived experience. The value we bring into the world is experiential, not theoretical. It comes from what we've lived through, adapted to, and learned from. That's why no one can do what you do in the way you do it, and why copying someone else's path eventually drains us. In hindsight, my own work makes sense. I couldn't do this work without the life I've lived, without a childhood that required me to read emotional undercurrents early, without learning to read the subtitles of body language in one tone or noticing somatic shifts. Those experiences directly shaped my capacity, not because suffering is special, but because experience teaches us things theory never will. Purpose lives there. It's not somewhere out there or in the future, but in accessing what's present for us right now based on what our life has already taught us. And many of us recognize our purpose, but just push it away as a hobby or a side thought. Most people look outward for direction. They ignore the intelligence built into their body. They assume the past is something to move beyond. But in reality, it's the raw material needed to understand, accept, and express ourselves. Purpose emerges when our experience is integrated, not bypassed. But integration requires something most people never learned. Letting go of who we had to be so we're able to see our authentic selves clearly. There's a reason why this is so hard to do alone. Identity didn't form in isolation, it formed in relationship, whether that be family, schools, or social systems. So loosening it feels dangerous to our connections. Our nervous systems don't register authenticity as growth, they register it as potential loss of connection. That's why people hesitate when they get close to what matters. Procrastination is not laziness, it's protection. So here's what actually helps. Purpose reconnects through permission. The permission to disappoint, to say no, to stop being impressive. The permission to choose something true to you. As those permissions accumulate, something shifts. Energy returns, interest sharpens, direction stops feeling forced, and joy can be experienced. Purpose doesn't arrive as a lightning bolt, it stabilizes. Because it was never gone. It was waiting underneath who you learned you had to be accepted. So we must find someone able to accept us fully as we are, someone who needs no performance and has no agenda in our story. And this is where therapy fits. Talk therapy isn't about adding something new or fixing something broken, it's about removing what never belonged. Together you'll strip away the inauthentic parts that once kept you safe and small, and create space for the authentic ones beneath to be revealed and expressed. When identity no longer has to be defended, direction doesn't need to be chased, it just is. It becomes obvious. A life organized around authenticity doesn't require accountability because it doesn't drain you, it carries you. If this resonates, I post more long-form work like this here, so subscribe if you want to keep exploring. And if you're ready to move beyond understanding and into real change, therapy is the place where this work really becomes reality.